Hello, and welcome to Authors Amplified. I'm your host, Stephanie O'Neill. My show is a part of the Amplified Podcast Network, where ideas echo and voices resonate. With over 20 years at Christian Television Network, I've had the privilege of meeting countless talented and spiritual individuals, and it's too inspiring not to share. I'm just a girl who loves Jesus wholeheartedly. I'm eager to learn and grow, and I'd like you to join me on this journey. In each episode, I'll be speaking with Christian authors who will share their stories and insights about the books they've written. I'm thrilled to have you with us, so let's get started. Welcome to another Authors Amplified. I am so excited to have our guest today. I've known her for a while, and I'm so happy we got to connect this way. Karen Whiting, she's an international speaker, a former television host, and a national award-winning author of 34 books for women, children, families, and the military. And that she's not even stopping there. She's got more new books coming out. But the book we're going to talk about today is Stories of Faith and Courage from the Home Front. And I promise you, you've never heard about or seen a book like this before. So Karen, welcome. Thank you so much for being here and for your time.
Oh, great to be with you, Stephanie. Just great anytime I can see you.
Such a blessing to have you. So let's first just, I said a little bit about you, but can you just tell us a little bit more about you so our listeners know who they're listening to?
Well, I'm a mother of 5, including 2 rocket scientists, so that's always fun. I never wanted to write a sentence because I'm actually a mathematician. And
Oh,
all these books, God had different plans for me. And so that's been an interesting journey in my life. And I am grew up very entrenched with patriotic family up in New England with so many who served back to the French Indian War, not just the American Revolution. And my dad was World War II. My mother was actually a nurse, was supposed to go into the WACs, but they ended the war just before she got her uniform and they ended the war.
oh, wow.
So I have that one picture of her in it. But it's very interesting. My husband, of course, served 22 years in the Coast Guard.
Oh, wow.
My late husband. Yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. So let's talk about this book. The book is daily true stories matched with scriptures and prayers, and it showcases the fascinating and inspiring history of the heroines and their children at home. What inspired you to tell America's history from the home front rather than the battlefield?
I have always loved women's American history. As a military wife and daughter, I wanted to learn more about them. But what really happened is my editor at AMG, who published this book, said, "Hey, would you like to do a book on World War II?" And I just laughed and said, "I don't know any military strategy. I don't know about cannons and machine guns and all of this." I said, "But what I'd love to do a book on are the women on the home front." They said, "Well, what would that even be about?"
Mhm.
And I had to explain and go back to Abigail Adams and things that she had said and how she was going to be the greatest farmeress ever. And she almost lost the farm, not because she wasn't good at farming, but she had such a generous heart. When soldiers in that Boston area were hungry, she just gave away food to them.
Mhm.
Didn't have enough to sell, but she, with her husband going over to France for several years, she had him ship back all the china and things that he could, and she sold that and became a merchant. And that's not only did she make money, she was able to save money for them and invest it.
Wow. Wow. So why do you think women's stories, especially during the American Revolution, have been they're just so overlooked,
Right? Because they weren't in the major battles. I
right?
wouldn't say they didn't get involved with them. They worked as spies. They worked behind the scenes in so many ways. But people always bring forth the generals, the politicians that were involved. And even though the women had a bigger impact than the Boston Tea Party, and in fact, the Boston Tea Party wouldn't have been what it was without the mother of the Boston Tea Party. So it's, but they are overlooked because men also at that time wrote most of the history books.
True. That's true. I mean, when we first started talking, I told you I've never heard of a book like this. I've never seen a book like this. You don't typically hear about the people that were left behind, that had to take care of everything and that did amazing accomplishments because you've always just hear about the men or the women on the battlefield.
Yes. And even then, you don't hear about the things that were so hard for the women.
Right.
And with George Washington, and he had a heart of compassion and felt bad, but he only had a few jobs for women to do laundry and cook. And so they had these camp women that would follow behind the soldiers, behind them marching. They had so little that they would take a shirt off of a dead soldier just to have clothing to wear.
Mm,
Because we didn't have housing for them at that time. We didn't have pensions for them if their husband died. They had nothing.
that is amazing and something that I have never thought about. What they must have went through because they didn't have what we have now. I mean, being my son went to war and just knowing what we went through back home, but we could hear, we could hear from that him. We could know that he was okay. They knew nothing. There was no internet. There was no, email. There were no texting. There was no satellite phones. There was nothing back then. And
Oh, right. We didn't have texting and email when my husband served, and I can remember a time when the entire bag was lost. And
oh,
the wives didn't get anything, but my husband happened to go on shore and mail something to me. And I got something, but I noticed it wasn't an FPO address.
mm,
And I said to the women, they're not forgetting you. We have to ask the admiral to have them go find the mail. And they eventually found that bag of mail that had been helicoptered off the ship.
wow. I mean, these are just things we don't think of now. That is unbelievable. Well,
Right.
how did using original letters and journals change the way that these stories came alive for you?
Well, it gave me such a heart for them because those diaries and the journals these women wrote were from the heart. And some of them had such a perspective I didn't expect. This one woman, she was only 16, but at that point they could be married. And
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't married, but Lydia just was outside of Baltimore. They had a house in Baltimore, but when the Battle of Baltimore was going to come, they moved to their house, which actually overlooked the harbor. She woke up in the morning, and one of the things she wrote in her diary was, and the banner yet waved. And I thought, whoa, I always thought that was a term, a phrase that Francis Scott Key made up. It was a
Mm,
vernacular of the day to say that. And it changed. I thought a 16-year-old is saying this, what he is saying.
mm-hmm.
And that just was so unexpected. And so often things like that would happen, or finding a woman that decided, oh, uh, Mrs. Turner in the Carolinas, when she gets word that her son has been injured and they're going to amputate his leg, she was an old woman, they said. She rode 200 miles overnight on horseback to get there, said to the doctor, "You're not going to cut his leg off." And she didn't know what to do, but he said, well, he'll get gangrene. And she thought, no, he's not going to get gangrene. Let's see. I have to keep it moist. So she gets him in a cabin and has a tub suspended over that, drills a hole in it, and pours water in to drip on the wound. And she saved his leg. He became governor. And not only that, but they used her method through the Civil War to save limbs.
Isn't that just like a mother?
Yes. And she also served as a spy, and people just overlooked her.
Wow.
The British thought, she's too old. She's not doing anything. She's harmless.
That's amazing. Gosh. So how does this book challenge traditional narratives about women's roles in early American history?
What happened is you start looking, and if you can get the word out, at things such as the tea boycotts, which started 5 years before the Boston Tea Party, really, they had such an impact. They brought down the sale of tea by the British to the colonies by 67%. They lost millions of dollars.
Wow.
And because of that, they developed the Townshend Act in Britain to tax more so that they could make more on the tea they did sell. And that instigated the Tea Party. But if the women hadn't been boycotting because of all the things that were happened, it wouldn't even have occurred. And so you see the power of the women when they want to boycott. You see the prayerful women who did things. You see the women
Mm.
who were courageous when men wanted to attack at their home front. You see one woman that she's has two of her sons captured. That's a lot to have two sons captured, even
Oh,
if she did have four. And she decided, I'm going to go out. And she captures six British soldiers on her own, marches them up and said, each one of yours. Mine were three of each of yours. So I will trade these six for my two. And they did the trade. That takes a lot of
I
gumption,
mean, a
lot of
these are
courage,
stories you don't hear. I
right?
mean, that is amazing.
Yes. And then you have women, I had mentioned Abigail Adams, but women who had to hold down the fort. Catherine Goddard, the first woman to print a newspaper because of her family member who had to go serve. And he was a relative of Benjamin Franklin. So she's doing the Baltimore paper, and actually is the first one to print the Declaration of Independence with the names of the signers. The Declaration was printed because the men found somebody right after they signed the Declaration to publish the words, but no one had published it with those names on it, which actually was dangerous for the men. They could have been
Hmm.
caught for treason at some point to know their names.
Wow. So you read a lot of original letters and journals. How did faith sustain women and families during the times of war and uncertainty?
They clung to their faith. They really did. And the sermons they had to listen to, because the beginning of the week, I usually have some original letters or a sermon or something sustain them also. But you have someone like Anne up in Connecticut with the Battle of Griswold. She's an orphan that had been taken in by her aunt and uncle. And on the day of the battle, her aunt is giving birth to a new child. And after hours, he hasn't come home, and other soldiers they've seen have come back. She goes, uh, she walks to the battlefield. She finds him, and he says, "Oh, if I could just see my wife and hold that baby before I die, I would die, a happy man." And so she goes back, gets the wife and the baby on horseback, and takes them to the battlefield, brings them to him, and he puts the baby on his chest,
Mm.
and he dies soon after that. Now, she has a boyfriend, she has a fiance. She can't find him either. She doesn't even look till after. She takes care of Nathaniel, and she he's captured, he's gone. And it was 2 years before he came back. But during that time, she's helping with the farm, and he comes back and wants to get married. And she says, I cannot marry until my aunt and the children are old enough to take care of the farm without me. He waits for her. And one thing to know about her is she read through the Bible every year for over 60 years.
Wow.
And that was, you can see, not only did it sustain her, but that's what drove her to live her faith.
We forget because of all of the modern conveniences we have. Boy, we forget what they went through, how they had to deal with things, and we don't have it as hard as we think we do, right?
Exactly. This is so right. And so many things that happened that these women, their children, and these children were good. I mean, some of them were in houses where the dad was a loyalist, the mom was, a patriot. And one little girl, they called her Black-Eyed Susan. She was in the Philadelphia area and she wanted to do something. She says, Mom, there's a young boy, and he was, basically a teenager who comes into town to pick up supplies. And I play games with him, but we could pass messages. And she started doing that. And she passed a message that helped George Washington win one of the battles. And she was so excited. She goes home and she says, and she finally goes to the fireplace and yells up the chimney because she can't let her father hear what she's doing.
That's
And the
funny.
soldiers are almost suspecting, and they're ready to capture her when she throws her apron up over his face, playing hide and seek, and puts something in where she knows he hides everything, and then makes him chase her. And so they think, oh, it's just kids.
Right, right. Too funny. Wow. I I just have so much like in my brain right now that I want to. This would be a great book. So say you sit with your children in the morning and have breakfast before school. This would be a great book just to read a story every morning because we've really lost a lot of people have really lost touch. And especially since we never hear about the women
Right.
on the home front, man, this would be a great book just to, even if you're not a history buff or you're not really, you need to know these things and your children need to know these things.
Yes, and it goes from 1755 till 2012, from French Indian War to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So even though the Revolutionary War is a good chunk of, a section of that book, there's so much that is there, and you see the development and how women progress from just being the wife to going into careers, to going into the military themselves. All of that is seen if you read. That's kind of a red thread that goes through the book. There's about
Mhm.
four different threads that go through that as you see what has happened through time. And it's because of all the women did that finally in the 1900s they were able to get the vote.
Wow. Like it's so many things that we've just forgotten about. It's pretty crazy. So, was there one story that stayed with you long after writing the book? Was there something that just stuck with you?
I think Abigail Snelling, you may have heard of Fort Snelling out in the Midwest.
Hmm.
Her father fought in the French Indian War and the American Revolution. She was orphaned. Uh, and just before the War of 1812, and she met Lewis and Clark while they were stationed in St. Louis. And when they were going west, she stayed at the home of President Harrison before he became president. And her brother went in the military and had her come live with him because she'd been with her parents in Boston. And she met and married her husband, Captain Snelling, Josiah, and he started Fort Snelling, and she's the one who said, we need help. And they built housing into that fort. And she taught the Native American children. She set up Sunday school for the children in the fort of the families. And they were captured, she and her husband, but he was in Tippecanoe during 1812. And her son, one of them, was in the Civil War. She lived a long, long time. And she wrote letter after letter. It took her years, I mean, decades, to get a pension after her husband had died. But she did. But she forged the way for what we as military spouses and dependents received. And so that stayed with me because most people have never heard of her, even if they've heard of Fort Snelling.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. There's so many thoughts in my brain.
Well,
So,
plus she was a great letter writer. Talk about a networker. She wrote letters from people she met everywhere she had ever lived, and she was stationed in so many places. And that also brought the women together and shared what they could do.
right. Wow. So I mentioned earlier, I said, we don't know how lucky we are to have what we have, of course, with the internet but we still face different battles, of course, than they did. So how can modern families draw courage from these stories when facing uncertainty?
I think if you read them and you go back to any of them, you understand that they know your grief, they know your loneliness, they know what has happened, but they also have the courage to face things when something has to be changed, when you know I could be part of a movement that can make something better for the people in the military. That, you know, my husband was at the academy during Vietnam, and I was nearby at college, and we met while he was there. But I started seeing how people were treated in the military.
Mm.
Took years, but as wives, we were trying to lift that up, elevate it, and have us honor our men and women who were serving. And we eventually did it where people now thank them. And that's something that we have to have courage and know people may want to spit on you if they know that's what your husband did. And we're
Hmm.
back to some people not being happy with some of our government employees. And
Hmm.
we need to, have the courage to stand up for what we believe in.
That's true. Amen and amen. That's a good word. Did researching the women change your own view of American history?
Yes, I didn't know how much they did. There's
Hmm.
some, we hear a little bit, and you have these children's books, Luddington, and her being like the female Paul Revere. What you don't, that's a tip of the iceberg of what she did. Her father, Colonel Luddington, had served with George Washington in the French Indian War and was one of the first people recruited to be in George Washington's Secret Service. Most people don't know about that.
Mm-mm.
She helped her father. She made up a code to let spies coming to stay at their home know whether they could come in, they had to leave, or they had to hide. And the reason she rode those 40 miles that she did is she knew her father's where all her father's men were, and she had to alert them and bring them to her home so that he could take them off to battle. And he battled against General Tyrone, and they got Tyrone to stop, who never then went back into New York. But that was the battle that they held down south right after the burning of the town in Connecticut. I can see the town. Uh, and so she made a big difference. And we don't see what she did beyond that one ride.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And what do you hope readers, especially young readers, take away from all these stories?
That there's no limits for us as women, that
Mm-hmm.
there's no limit to our courage if God is calling us to do something, that we can do it and trust in Him, and that He will give us the right thoughts of what to do. I can think of one girl who she's riding through, she's stopped by the enemies and they want to search her. And when they go to search her, she takes out the messages, she memorizes them and eats the paper so that they can't find her and they let her go. And she delivered it orally.
Wow.
But she just prayed, what do I do? And
Right. Right. It talks so much about faith in these books because that's what these women had. They had faith in our Jesus that we can still have faith in today.
yes,
I mean, it's just amazing to me because I'll be totally honest with you, not a history buff, but man, this makes me want to know more and want to read more about all of them.
yes, yes. Well, I probably wouldn't have been a history buff, but I was born on a great aunt's birthday named after her, and she was our town historian. And
Okay.
lived in a house built in 1710. And so she put that sense, that love of history into me.
I love that so much. So the title of the book is Stories of Faith and Courage from the Home Front. The author is Karen Whiting. Where can listeners find your book?
This book can be found almost anywhere books are sold, whether it's online or at your local store. The stores can all order that if they don't have it. And they can also go to my website, KarenWhiting.com, and order direct from me if they want it autographed.
And and many other books that you've
Yeah,
written on there. I mean, check it out for sure.
it is
Oh,
a big,
wow. Yeah.
and look at the paper, even makes it look old. I just love how they did that.
Yes, I mean it's a book you're going to want to have in your library, and you just want to go back to it over and over again because it will lift your spirits. It will give you a faith like that you didn't have before. It's hard to explain. You just need to
And
read the book.
it's only 400 words a day. It may be a 600-page book because there's a lot of endnotes,
Yeah,
big biography, but it's only 400 words a day, so it's very doable.
yeah, and this is stuff we need to know. Really, it's just stuff we need to know.
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's the right year, 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Good time to read this.
Yes. Perfect. Good time to read it to your children. Good time for you to read it. Karen, thank you so, so much for your time. I appreciate you so much. I'm so glad I finally got you on here. I'm so glad you had reached out to Paul and Paul sent you to me. I was like, yes, I know Karen. I want her.
Well, thank you. And Stephanie, it's always a pleasure to chat with you and see you when I'm over that way.
Yeah, thank you. And you'll be on again because I know you have more new books coming out.
I do. There's always something, isn't there?
Wonderful. Well, we'll have you on again. Thanks for tuning in to Authors Amplified. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe for more incredible authors next time.